So, I don't know if we're logistically good. There you go. All right, so I'm going to talk today about operational assessment indexes. So what the heck is that? Basically, what I'm trying to do, button, down button, this one, or now, down button. All right, thank you. What we're trying to do as a technologist, we work on TechnoSil, but we're working in the last 4 years, we've been working with CAL FIRE. We were selected by the state, and we were before with some agencies here in California, trying to provide tools for the Intel community, trying at least to reduce a little the complexity, and putting all these, bells and whistles so that technology give us in something that is really actionable and is useful, right? Because to be honest, all those beautiful maps and all those simulations and all of that are absolutely useless if they are not really operational. And that's what we're trying to do under the guidance of the Intel community in CAL FIRE. So what are the wildfire indexes? Well, we know, we love indexes in wildfire, and we know basically we're trying to make something that is very complex to communicate it in an efficient way, right? And the most well-known indexes are fire danger indexes, like the one that we have supported by the NFDRS. This is a graph that tried to show, so summarize, it's a wonderful video done by Matt Jolly from the Missoula Fire Lab. He's the main researcher leading the NFDRS. And he tried to put all the complexity that is behind those indexes, because there is a lot. We know that to try to understand the fire environment, we have to take into account many things, but at the end of the day, we have to take decisions based and communicate situations in an easy way, and that's what the indexes are for. Something that is very common that we know, that is accessible for us every day. From a long time ago, from the predictive services, our friends there produced based on the NFDRS and some other tools at their hand, their significant fire potential that is computed and calculated by different predictive services areas, right? And that's something that in a very simple scale, from red to green, from green to red, we know at that predictive services areas what is going to be the conditions for the next 7 days. Well, this is what we have, and that's what we were challenged first with this request for innovative ideas that CAL FIRE put in place, and we responded in 2019. Because what this index tried to explain is, on one side is what is the daily probability of occurrence of a large fire? And the second question that tried to be answered by this index is, what is the daily potential of significant new growth on an existing fire? So those two questions. New fires that could be large, and fires that are already ongoing, what is going to be their growth, or what is going to be their potential, right? But the problem is that the granularity is not there. We have the general conditions, so what can we do with the actual science, with actual data here? That's what we try to do, okay? And it's the down button. So we built two indices. One is the initial attack index, and the other one is the standard attack index, basically, to try to answer those questions. What is the initial attack index? Basically, it's an index that tries to prepare in advance and help to set up dispatching and preparedness levels. And it's based on simulation, and it's focused on initial attack fires. When you don't have a team, when you don't have an evidence in place, but you need to have, and the sooner the better, an assessment of what that incoming fire looks like, right? So what do we take into account? Well, what we do to build this index is take into account, okay, the conditions of the fire environment, as everybody does. Okay? We look at the fire behavior, what is the expected flame length, what is the expected rate of spread. We look at the conditions of the terrain, we look at the conditions of the fire growth at the very beginning of the fire. We're looking at the first 2 hours of the fire. That's what we look. We start the fire, and what we do is we start a simulation that summarizes all that data, right? So on one side, we have the dynamic part of the fire behavior, which is flame length and rate of spread, and on the other side, we look at the scenario, the fire environment. We look at the terrain, and we built an index called the terrain difficulty index, right? So all those indexes together, the terrain, complexity of the terrain, and the fire behavior together give us the initial attack assessment of that fire. That's how it is. So I have some slides how we build it. Basically, the fire behavior index, what we do is we start a fire every kilometer all over the western US. Actually, started with California, we're running all the western US. For the next 5 days, and we start one fire in the same spot every 3 hours, okay? We compute and calculate what is the rate of spread, what is the flame length, and we put all those together in maps like this, okay? Basically, what this index is it's a part of the initial attack assessment, that's the fire behavior, is the holding chart. That's what it is, right? It's based on the rate of spread and the flame length. If the fire behavior is gonna be low, moderate, or high, that's what it is, right? So we have one part that is dynamic, and we compute those fire behavior maps, flame lengths, rate of spread all over the West, as I mentioned. We compute how large the fires could be, and all of that, we put it together as the dynamic part of the initial attack assessment index. The terrain, how we build the terrain difficulty. And our indexes, by the way, 1 is easy, 5 is bad, okay? Very simple to communicate. The terrain, we look at the condition of the terrain, and there are several sub-indices, I won't stop on them, but basically, suffice to say is how remote is the area, how difficult is the access, slow ruggedness of the terrain, difficulty to open hand line, to work open line with equipment, all of that together, and we make a map that is like this, and tell us, in this example, red is bad, and I have here, for example, the footprint of the August complex, the LNU complex, and we're comparing the perimeters. Here's the perimeter of the LNU complex, and that's the index. It's in many cases, the fires are stopped on easier terrain, in the blue one, which makes sense, right? In some cases, the fires are stopped in very complex terrain, right? So it tells you about, river fire, SLU complex. It tells you where there may be opportunities regarding the terrain. And when you put all of that together, and we have evaluated, we started to work in 2019, and unfortunately, we have plenty of opportunities to test and calibrate those indexes in the last 3 fire seasons, right? The Dixie here, the Caldor here, right? For example, you look things like this on the Caldor, you see opportunities theoretically here, but when you have a spotting of 3 miles, the opportunities disappear, and things like that, right? But we try to calibrate them with actual fire, right? So we take on one side the fire behavior index, and we can take the terrain difficulty index, and we create this initial attack assessment that is computed and delivered in this way. How we do deliver all this data? In a way that is digestible. Well, all these things should be digestible, and there are many people playing in the fire service. Some of there are people in the intel unit, some people that are just on the dispatch center, or some people that are just in the truck. Is a fire captain that is going to the fire. So we need to give different types of information products for them to be useful, right? So for example, the initial attack assessment index is created and computed statewide for the next 5 days. And the specialists at the WIFT Center and the specialists at the units from CAL FIRE, and also this year in South Ops and North Ops with the US Forest Service, they evaluate these indexes for the next 5 days. And they cover everything. For example, we have the same area. These exchanges, for example, this was the value of the initial attack assessment index before the lighting LNU complex in 2020, and this was after. In 2021, the index is very low. Why? Because we don't have the field, right? The terrain is the same. And that's how it's delivered. Also, every day, we compute this graph, which is basically, it's a grid by every CAL FIRE unit for the next 5 days of how the index is summarized by unit. It could be summarized by battalion or by national forest. Which are the numbers for the next 5 days, and for every 3 hours, where are we expecting that the values are gonna be high at the unit level. So you can set up, it can be useful for setting up a preparedness level, right? Then we have fires that start. Fires that are coming from the different dispatch systems, right? And this map of California, you don't see very well, but this map is not a map with points. It's a map with points and colors and numbers. So every fire is not an icon of a fire. What it is a number from 1 to 5. This fire is a 1, this fire is a 5. And we start those fires by getting from the dispatch, from the CAT, or they are coming from hotspots from the satellite, or they're coming from lighting strikes, or even they are coming from the National Guard data. National Guard data is giving us fire activity. So every point that comes into the system that is a fire starting, we run a simulation, and that simulation is delivered in the mobile app. The mobile app that the units have on the field, they have this one-pager. This one-pager that has the initial attack assessment index, has the weather data for the next 8 hours, has how many people may be impacted, what is going to be the fire behavior, etc. And that is what the firefighters get, the small one-pager that looks like this, okay? That's for the initial attack assessment index. We've been working with this during 3 years, and it's very well, pretty much well calibrated, and it's basically right now, every incident that appears, it gets evaluated like that. And I would say that probably the biggest source of errors that we have basically are coming from the location of the CAD, because sometimes the fires are 2 miles away. So it's at the other side of the road, then we have a problem. But as soon as we have the units on the field, they can get another assessment automatically. Okay, let's go to the standard attack assessment. What is the standard attack assessment index? Well, now we have an ongoing incident. Now we have an ongoing incident, we have a major incident, and when we're looking at what the opportunities that we may have in the next days, now the advanced and the specialists of the Intel, the IMETs, they look at a plethora of different websites, different indexes, and try to put together and distill something that tells, okay, well, we're gonna have opportunities today at this time of the day, or the conditions are gonna be the same for the next 2 or 3 days, right? And this is actually this was on the August complex. So what we tried to do is, instead of giving something that what we have in unpredicted services has a ton of value, but to be honest, it's not very granular. So what we did is, okay, we need to know what is the potential fire activity in the whole Western US. Do we have a place to look the fire activity? The answer is yes. We have satellites now, right? And actually, there is specifically one satellite, which is called the BEERS, that is giving us non-stop, twice a day, fire activity every 300 meters, 375 meters, which is pretty good. It's really pretty good. And we start to have that data from 2012. And that's about 11 years of data. And probably when I came to this country in 2010, the largest fire in California was the Cedar Fire. Well, from 2012 to now, the Cedar Fire is at the bottom of my list of the 20 largest fires in California. So we have a ton of observed fire behavior in the last year, right? So it's good. We have a ton of observed fire behavior with good instruments and someone that is not just capturing perimeters. We're just looking at that problem, right? On the other side, what do we have? We have a ton of information that is coming from different sources of data, and we'll see which one, right? We have, for example, information about the drought. And the drought is something that when we do a simulation on a fire, we look at the drought, but to be honest, that is not in the models that we use for running a simulation, but we know that it has an impact, right? And we have also information about the fuels. And when we look at the fuels map that we have, typically those fuels maps are done for surface fire behavior. But we know that there are areas where the fuels, and have my friend Bob Eisley that miseducated me in Southern California fire behavior, fuels is really the key component. And fire history in an area is a key component, and the perturbations in an area is a key component. So it's important. So we have that information, we have the terrain, and we have some variables that we'll see that typically are not included in the most traditional models, which basically are driving extreme fire behavior like convection, etc. So we'll see a little about that. So the initial attack assessment index, we run simulations, 180 million simulations every day. With the standard attack assessment index, we're running 7 days, every 3 hours, but we are not running simulations. It's a danger system, but it has and includes some variables that we didn't have in FVRS, right? But it's also 7 days, and it's 2 kilometer resolution. It's not the PSA level. It's 2 kilometer resolution what we're delivering, right? Okay, so we built it with data from satellites from 2012, and also because we want to explain fire behavior, we needed to have the weather conditions, right? Well, fortunately, we have what is called a reanalysis of the data that the weather models continuously all over the Western US for the last 30 years. So basically we have, instead of looking at the forecast, the forecasts sometimes are not very good. The reanalysis is like the forecast of the past when we know the data that happened in the weather stations. So that data is pretty good. So we have the weather conditions, we have the fire, we have the fuels because we can go back in time in fuels. We have land fire data from more than 10 years. So we have mostly all the ingredients, right, to make this puzzle, okay? So we evaluated more than 10 different variables, talking with the different bands and specialists telling us, okay, well, I think this plays a role, this plays a role. And we used supercomputers and we ran 150 billion calculations of the last 10 years, of a ton of data. There were small guys doing with the machine for a long time. And we did something that is very fancy now, they call machine learning. What the heck is machine learning? Machine learning is basically a regression study. It's just a regression. But because it's so complex, and this thing is complex, there's so many variables, so many data, it's the machine that does the adjustments for us. And that's the reason it's called machine learning. The beauty of that is that because we train the model with so much data, it cannot be very solid. It kind of works very well because, well, we have enough bad fire behavior in the last years, right? So what we did is we got all the Western US with these small hexagons, and we added the data, we put everything together, we put the different variables, and we scaled that data down at a 1 kilometer resolution level. And because we did it with these hexagons, we can summarize the data at different unit levels. For example, the hexagons, I can put together hexagons by making it summarizing by, for example, weather zones, or national forests, or CAL FIRE units, or counties. The analysis is the same, but depending who is the user, you can summarize the data and say, okay, you know what, give me the data by my battalion, right? Okay, so which variable do we use? The fuels. Fuels are critical, and we came with the concept of fuels complexity. Basically, fuels complexity is the type of fuel, also included the age of the fuel is not the same at Chaparral. I mean, when you look at the fuel models on the NFDRS, or in the Scott and Burgan fuel models, the values of the amount of biomass is the same. But we know that an area that is 50, 60, 80 years old Chaparral is not the same as 20 years old Chaparral or 150 years old Chaparral, right? So we included the age of the fuel, and we also included the perturbations, the pest, right? We included the terrain difficulty, because it's not the same. This is not, when we do this in Florida, well, it's flat, okay? But here we have terrain, so it's okay. It's important here. We included the drought, and the drought is important, and there are several indices out there, and this is a pretty nice one, the EDDI. It's available also for the long series of time that we're looking at, and it indicates this mid-range drought that it's also impacting our heavier fuels, okay? Obviously, it's very important to have information about the fuel moisture and the winds. We also include them. And we included two variables that are not included in the generic, in the other models as the NFDRS that we plan to include, which is the instability, right? So if we have the potential for thunderstorms, right, that may also raise the alert or something it's an opportunity, maybe lost, or maybe we'll have opportunities. Actually, the instability, we use what is called the lifted index, and the lifted index is very good at telling you potential of thunderstorms, but it also tells you when you have very high and windy conditions, this index works in the other direction, right? And finally, we included an index which is new, which is the convective flag. The convective flag, are you guys familiar with the Haynes index? That tells about, okay, so we're trying to replace or improve the functionality that is requested by you guys to understand a little the potential of convective fire behavior with this convective flag. It's very IMET territory, it's not mine, but suffice to say that it's been proven. It was developed initially in Australia. We've been testing it with 24 large incidents recently in the last 3 years. It seems that it is very powerful in identifying the potential of, okay, we may have convective fire behavior in the next days, okay? So that's also part of it. So we've been following Dixie Fire, as I mentioned. Scott Purdy is the author. He's our meteorologist, and well, it's going to be it's going to be operational this year. So we'll see if it works. It worked in the past, but we'll see how it works on prediction, right? Well, a machine learning, what it does is gets all this data, they put it together, and it looks at the fire behavior that it sees actually with the beers, and try to identify how these variables work. And for example, this is a graph. This is what is called a dispersion graph, but basically is that the combination of the terrain plus the complexity of the fields explains the fire activity. So the higher the complexity and the more complex the terrain, tell us that there is more fire activity, which everybody knows, okay? But we want something that predicts all of this, right? So we do all of that with the different indexes, and we see how the vapor pressure deficit is also telling us that when there's more vapor pressure deficit, we have more fire activity, the wind speeds, obviously, et cetera, right? Well, we build the model, and now the model has to be validated. So that's the way that we try to pretend that, okay, let's offer something to you. And the validation was done with actual incidents, right? So we had the incidents that we built the model the last year, and then we have until 2012, and then we have, this is how the model looks for example, the McKinney fire, that was last year. So the McKinney fire, this is the map of the index, the 29th, 30th, 31st, and the 1st, right? And basically what we see, the points here are fire activity with the hotspots. So we see that when the index is red or purple, there's a ton of fire activity, all right? And then all of a sudden, the index goes down, there is no fire activity. So that's how it works, right? So we provide these indexes for every incident. For example, one of the parts of the McKinney fire who developed a very powerful convective behavior, one of the convective flag, which is the lower values of the higher potential for convection, were captured for this fire. And that was one of the components that was telling us that this fire there was not a window of opportunity during those days. When do we have the window of opportunity? In 3 days, okay, not now, right? And that's what we try to do. Try to provide those windows of opportunity at a 2-kilometer resolution for every incident, okay? The Fairview fire, exactly the same. We see the hotspots, then the index goes down, and we have it here. Well, we've gone through more than 450 fires just in the last 3 years. So it's, we're expecting that it performs. This is the Creek fire, for example. All the values of the EAA very high. The Eddy, which is the drought, very high. The lifted index didn't play a big role, but the convective flag had a big role at the beginning. And these are the hotspots that tell us that at the same time that we had the hotspots, the EAI was very high, right? So the delivery of this index, many examples, that's the mosquito fire, the same, so we're going through all of them, many graphs. How do we deliver this to finalize? Well, first, on the Wolfram Analyst, that's a product that the Intel unit in Cal Fire and the GACs used for service is going to have two users of this application. We compute this 7 days in advance. The other one was for the initial attack. This is for actual ongoing fires. We compute all those variables for 7 days in advance. It looks like this. For example, on the Wolfram Analyst, they will be able to look. This is the Labor Day weekend, 2020. The whole Sierra on Labor Day weekend. We're talking about the North Complex, Caldor Fire, Dixie, August Complex. Everything was in purple. So we have fire activity here, but any fire that started around here will be kind of exactly the same. So the analysts are going to be able to look backwards in time and see how this is performing. This is new for today. Actually, I see my friends in South Oaks here and the WIFTIC. We published this today, just like 5 minutes before I came. This is a grid for current incidents. For any incident that is coming from dispatch or any incident that is ongoing, we provide 7 days of what is the standard attack looking like for that incident, for all the individual incidents. So that's ongoing. So there's going to be, I think it's going to be a very nice dashboard that's going to tell us, okay, well, which fires do we have working? How it's going to look the next days on these guys? Okay, these guys seem to have less opportunities. I think that's going to be relevant for the, at the GAG or at the dispatch level or the WIFT level. And we deliver also this dashboard for one incident. For one incident, it's 7 days. For every incident, we display, in this case, this was the creep fire, what is a standard attack, the ADDI, the index, everything in one page. We're going to make this a nice report, so also it can be explained during the team meetings. So basically, we're trying to make in the planning section, all the intel, you need kind of summarize the data in one spot so it can be transferred, right? And yeah, basically, all of this is useless without the Intel community. This is a picture that I took last year of the Intel meeting in Santa Rosa with the Cal Fire folks. We've been really, really super, I mean, it's been phenomenal to team with all this personnel, the different type of, education. There are people from the fire service, but also people from the data, social sciences, and all of them together are using all these technologies and all these tools and providing intel at a significant pace, right? It's not easy because all of this, as I mentioned, well, it looks fancy, it looks shiny objects, but to be honest, at the end of the day, what we're trying to provide is tools, and tools that are reliable and that with the right personnel would just help to inform the complexity of the scenario that we're facing. Basically, that was what I was going to talk about. If you guys have any questions, happy to answer.
Just on when you're putting your train difficulty,
yeah.
You mentioned age of the vegetation model.
Yes.
Are you also able to incorporate specific areas that have like large blight or bug kill already?
Yeah, perturbations, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, perturbations. It's perturbations, age, and type of fuel. That's what we're trying to get. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Have you used this like ahead of prescribed fire to see how your data translates
Aha.
going in?
Yeah, no, but that's that's great. I mean, that's great. And to be honest, you know what? That will screw how the names fit. So initial attack, standard attack. What the heck? It obviously, I think it can help to support the prescribed burn planning process. I think we've done something similar in Portugal. We have for different species, for shrubs, Pinus pinaster and eucalyptus, a product that is, one is a window for eucalyptus, one is a window for all of them. I think that here we should do something a little more refined, but the data is kind of the same, and well, there's a window for that. Obviously for prescribed fire, we'll need to include the transport wind conditions, which is not part of this, but yeah, should be, yeah, good. Thank you. For my data, okay. So first, that was the weakest part. The fuels data was the weakest part when we started to do the modeling here in California. That was the weakest part because the land fire data is great, but it's just a start. They tell you it's at the strategical level, not operational level. So part of the work that we're doing, actually, I just showed an example on the fuels part, is we're doing a fuels map every year, and we're doing 3 times a year with LiDAR data. The LiDAR is data come from, so we have LiDAR from the USGS. Now there's a new LiDAR. We fill the gaps with LiDAR from the space called GDI. And now we're working on making a California fuels atlas by making samples of about 100 acres with a drone and a LiDAR to get the actual amount of biomass, okay? The age, well, the age is easier, kind of, because CAL FIRE has a great database of fire perimeters since 2048, I think is the oldest one. So basically, we look at areas and we try to say, okay, what is the time since the last fire? When it's less than 20 years, we also not only look at the perimeter, we look also at the intensity, because a perimeter doesn't mean that everything was black. So we have to look at how the fire burned that area. And then every year, we review the fields with satellites and the recovery of the fields three times a year. So it's a ton of work on the fields. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a photo.